Marcus Richardson adjusted his worn baseball cap and pulled it lower over his eyes as he stepped out of the ordinary sedan. The car was a rental, nothing fancy, nothing that would draw attention. He had learned long ago that sometimes the best way to see the world clearly was to make yourself invisible. The small diner sat on the corner of 5th and Main Street in Cedar Falls, a town most people drove through without stopping. The neon sign flickered slightly, casting pink and blue shadows across the cracked sidewalk. Marcus had chosen this place carefully. No one would expect to find him here, not Marcus Richardson, the man whose face graced the covers of business magazines, and whose net worth was discussed in financial circles around the world. He pushed open the glass door, and a small bell chimed above his head. The smell of coffee and bacon filled his nostrils, mixing with the faint scent of cleaning supplies and old vinyl booth seats. It was exactly what he had hoped for, real, honest, unpretentious. The diner was busier than he expected for a Tuesday evening. Families occupied several booths, their conversations creating a comfortable hum that mixed with the sizzle from the kitchen. A group of teenagers shared a large plate of fries in the corner, their phones forgotten on the table as they laughed about something from school. An elderly man sat alone at the counter, slowly working through a piece of apple pie while reading a paperback novel. Marcus chose a booth near the window, sliding across the red vinyl seat that had probably been there for decades. He picked up the laminated menu and smiled despite himself. It had been years since he had seen prices like these. A full dinner for what he spent on a single cup of coffee at the restaurants he usually frequented. "Good evening. Welcome to Rosie's Diner." He looked up to see a young woman approaching his table, notepad in hand. She was probably in her early 20s, with kind eyes and a genuine smile that reached all the way to her eyes. Her name tag read Keisha in neat handwriting. "Evening," Marcus replied, keeping his voice casual. "Nice place you have here." Keisha's smile widened. "Thank you. Rosie's been part of this town for over 40 years. My grandmother used to bring me here when I was little." She paused, pen hovering over her notepad. "Can I start you off with something to drink?" "Coffee would be great. Thank you. Coming right up." "Take your time with the menu." As Keisha walked away, Marcus found himself watching her interactions with other customers. She moved with efficient grace, refilling coffee cups before they were empty, remembering exactly how each regular customer liked their order prepared. When she stopped to chat with the elderly man at the counter, Marcus could see genuine concern in her expression as she asked about his wife's recovery from surgery. This was what he had come looking for, though he had not known it until this moment. Authenticity, real human connection. In his world of board meetings and business deals, every conversation had an agenda, every smile calculated for maximum benefit. Here, in this small-town diner, people were simply being themselves. Keisha returned with his coffee, the steam rising from the white ceramic mug. "Have you decided what you'd like to eat?" Marcus glanced at the menu again. "What do you recommend?" "Well, if you're really hungry, the meatloaf is fantastic. Rosie makes it herself, and it comes with mashed potatoes and green beans. But if you want something lighter, the grilled chicken sandwich is really popular, and the soup of the day is homemade vegetable beef." There was no upselling, no attempt to steer him toward the most expensive items. Just honest recommendations from someone who clearly took pride in her work. "I'll try the meatloaf," Marcus decided. "It sounds perfect. Excellent choice. I'll get that order in for you right away." While he waited for his food, Marcus observed the rhythm of the diner. Keisha was one of 2 servers working the evening shift, along with an older woman named Betty who had probably been serving customers longer than Keisha had been alive. In the kitchen, he could see a heavy-set man with graying hair working over the grill, and occasionally a woman with silver hair pulled back in a bun would appear, checking orders and making sure everything met her standards. That would be Rosie, he guessed. The food arrived faster than he expected, and it exceeded his hopes. The meatloaf was seasoned perfectly, the mashed potatoes were clearly made from scratch, and even the green beans had a fresh taste that spoke of careful preparation. This was comfort food at its finest, the kind of meal that nourished both body and soul. "How is everything?" Keisha asked when she stopped by to refill his coffee. "Outstanding," Marcus said, and he meant it. "This is some of the best food I've had in years." Keisha beamed with pride. "I'll tell Rosie you said so. She loves hearing when people enjoy her cooking." As the evening progressed, Marcus found himself lingering over his meal, reluctant to return to his hotel room, and the stack of business reports waiting for him. He ordered a piece of chocolate cake for dessert, then switched to decaffeinated coffee when Keisha suggested it might help him sleep better. The diner began to empty as the evening wore on. The families with young children left first, followed by the teenagers. The elderly man at the counter finished his pie and novel, leaving a generous tip before walking slowly to the door. By 9 o'clock, only a few customers remained. Marcus noticed that despite the slower pace, Keisha continued to work with the same attention to detail she had shown during the busy dinner rush. She wiped down empty tables, refilled salt and pepper shakers, and made sure the coffee station was well stocked for the next day. There was no supervisor watching over her, no one checking to make sure she completed these tasks. She did them because they needed to be done, because she took pride in her work. When she brought his check, Marcus was surprised to see the total. Even with his generous portions and dessert, the entire meal cost less than what he typically paid for an appetizer at the upscale restaurants he frequented. Yet the experience had been infinitely more satisfying. He placed two $50 bills on the table and stood to leave. Keisha was clearing a table nearby and looked over as he gathered his jacket. "Have a wonderful evening," she called out. "Thank you for choosing Rosie's." Marcus nodded and headed for the door, but something made him pause. Maybe it was the genuine warmth in Keisha's voice, or maybe it was the realization that he had just experienced something rare and precious. A simple, honest interaction with no hidden motives or calculated responses. He walked back to where Keisha was working. "Excuse me," he said quietly. "I wanted to ask you something." Keisha looked up, slightly surprised. "Of course. What can I help you with?" Marcus hesitated. He was not sure how to phrase what he wanted to know without sounding condescending or intrusive. "You clearly care a lot about this place and your work here. Have you thought about your future plans? College, maybe, or other career goals?" For a moment, Keisha's professional smile faltered, and Marcus caught a glimpse of something deeper in her expression. Worry, maybe, or frustration. But she recovered quickly. "I'm working on it," she said diplomatically. "Right now, I'm focused on doing the best job I can here." Marcus sensed there was more to the story, but he did not want to push. "Well, you're certainly doing an excellent job. Your customers are lucky to have you." He turned to leave again, but this time Keisha's voice stopped him. "Sir, you left way too much money on the table. Your bill was only $18. Marcus smiled. In his world, people often took whatever they could get and asked for more. The fact that this young woman was trying to correct what she assumed was his mistake only confirmed what he had already suspected about her character. "The extra is for you," he said. "You provided excellent service." Keisha's eyes widened. "But, sir, this is almost $100. I can't accept this much." "Yes, you can," Marcus said gently. "And you should. Good work deserves to be recognized." He left before she could protest further, stepping out into the cool night air. As he walked to his car, he could see Keisha through the window, staring at the money in her hands with an expression of disbelief. The drive back to his hotel gave Marcus time to think about the evening. He had come to Cedar Falls on business, planning to close a deal that would add another manufacturing plant to his company's portfolio. The local plant was struggling, and his acquisition would probably mean layoffs for workers who had spent their entire careers there. It was a sound business decision, the kind he made regularly without losing sleep. But tonight had reminded him of something he had almost forgotten in his climb to success. Behind every economic decision, every corporate restructuring, every efficiency improvement, there were real people with real lives. People like Keisha, who worked hard and took pride in their jobs, who deserved better than to be treated as expendable resources in someone else's profit calculation. Marcus had been born into modest circumstances himself. His father had worked 2 jobs to support the family, and his mother had cleaned houses to help pay for his college education. He had not forgotten those lessons about hard work and integrity, but somewhere along the way, the demands of business had made it easier to think in terms of numbers rather than people. The next morning, Marcus found himself thinking about Keisha as he sat in the conference room of the struggling manufacturing plant. The plant manager, a tired-looking man named Jim Torres, was explaining the challenges they faced: increased competition from overseas manufacturers, rising material costs, an aging workforce that required higher benefit costs. We've tried everything, Torres said, spreading financial reports across the conference table. Reduced shifts, voluntary early retirement packages, even a temporary pay freeze. Nothing's been enough to get us back in the black. Marcus studied the numbers, but his mind kept drifting to the conversation he had witnessed between Keisha and the elderly customer at the diner. She had asked about the man's wife with genuine concern, not because it would benefit her in any way, but because she cared about people in her community. "Tell me about your workers," Marcus said suddenly. Torres looked confused. "Sir, your employees. How long have most of them been with the company?" Torres consulted a different folder. "Average tenure is about 15 years. We have several people who've been here since we opened 22 years ago. It's a close-knit group, a lot of families, fathers and sons working side by side, that sort of thing." Marcus nodded slowly. "And if we proceed with the acquisition as planned, how many jobs would be eliminated?" "Approximately 60% of the workforce," Torres replied quietly. "We'd keep the most efficient production lines and close the rest." 60%. Marcus did the math quickly. That meant over 200 people would lose their jobs. 200 families would face financial uncertainty, possibly losing homes, having to uproot children from schools, watching dreams disappear. "Mr. Richardson?" Torres prompted. "Should we proceed with the paperwork?" Marcus looked out the conference room window at the factory floor below. Workers moved efficiently between machines, their movements speaking of years of experience and pride in their craftsmanship. These were not just numbers on a spreadsheet. They were people like Keisha, working hard and doing their best to build something meaningful. "I need some time to consider our options," Marcus said finally. "Let me review everything one more time before we make any final decisions." Torres looked surprised but nodded. "Of course, sir. Take all the time you need." That evening, Marcus found himself driving back to Rosie's diner. He told himself he just wanted another good meal, but he knew the truth was more complicated. He wanted to see Keisha again, wanted to understand what drove someone to care so deeply about a job that others might consider temporary or unimportant. The dinner rush was in full swing when he arrived. Marcus waited for a table, watching Keisha navigate between customers with the same grace and attention to detail he had observed the night before. When she finally had a moment to seat him, her face lit up with recognition. "You came back," she said, leading him to a booth near the back. "I was hoping I'd see you again. I wanted to thank you properly for yesterday." "No thanks necessary," Marcus replied. "I was just recognizing good service when I saw it." Keisha shook her head. "It was much more than that. That tip helped me in ways you probably don't realize." Before Marcus could ask what she meant, another customer signaled for attention, and Keisha hurried away to take their order. But her words stayed with him throughout the meal. What had she meant about helping in ways he did not realize? The answer came near the end of the evening when Marcus overheard Keisha talking quietly with Betty, the older server, near the coffee station. "I can't believe it," Keisha was saying, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was so worried about making rent this month, and then this stranger just appears like some kind of angel." Betty patted Keisha's shoulder. "You work harder than anyone I know, honey. Good things come to good people, even if it takes a while." Marcus felt a tightness in his chest as the pieces came together. Keisha was struggling financially, probably living paycheck to paycheck like so many people in towns across America. Her dedication to her job was not just about professional pride. It was about survival, about making ends meet in an economy that often seemed stacked against working people. When Keisha brought his check, Marcus made a decision that surprised even him. "Keisha," he said quietly, "could I ask you something personal?" She looked nervous but nodded. "Sure. Are you happy here? In this job, I mean. Is this what you want to be doing?" Keisha glanced around the diner, making sure no one was listening. "It's a good job," she said carefully. "Rosie treats us well, and I like the customers." "That's not what I asked." For a moment, Keisha's professional composure slipped entirely. Marcus saw exhaustion in her eyes, and something that looked like barely contained frustration. "I graduated from high school with a 3.8 GPA, she said quietly. "I had plans to go to college, study business administration. But my mom got sick my senior year, and someone had to help with the medical bills. Then, my younger brother needed help with his school expenses." She shrugged, trying to make it sound casual. Life happens. Plans change. But you still want to go to college? More than anything. I've actually been taking online courses when I can afford them, trying to work toward my degree one class at a time. It's slow going, but I figure it's better than giving up entirely. Marcus felt something shift inside him, a recognition of the gap between potential and opportunity that existed for so many people like Keisha. She had the intelligence, the work ethic, and the drive to succeed, but circumstances beyond her control had limited her choices. How much would you need? He asked suddenly. Excuse me. To finish your degree. How much would it cost? Keisha stared at him as if he had spoken in a foreign language. Sir, I don't understand why you're asking. Marcus realized how his question must sound to her. Intrusive, possibly condescending. I'm sorry. I don't mean to pry. He struggled to find the right words. I've been thinking a lot lately about opportunities and how they're distributed. Some people get chances handed to them, while others have to fight for every small step forward. Marcus spent the next 3 days in Cedar Falls, ostensibly to finalize the manufacturing plant acquisition, but his real focus had shifted entirely. During the day, he attended meetings and reviewed financial documents, but his evenings were spent at Rosie's Diner, observing Keisha and the community that had formed around this small restaurant. Each night revealed new layers to the story. He watched Keisha help an elderly woman count out exact change for her coffee, never showing impatience even when a line formed behind her. He saw her cover a shift for Betty when the older woman's grandson had a medical emergency. He witnessed her refusing tips from customers she knew were struggling themselves, saying their thanks was payment enough. But it was the interactions he observed outside the diner that truly opened Marcus's eyes to the challenges facing this community. Walking back to his hotel one evening, he saw Keisha at the bus stop, waiting for the late bus that would take her across town to her second job. A second job. She was working at the diner until 9 o'clock, then traveling across town to work a night shift somewhere else. Marcus sat in his hotel room that night, staring at his laptop screen. The cursor blinked in an empty email draft as he tried to figure out how to compose the message he wanted to send. How do you tell someone you barely know that you want to change their life? How do you make such an offer without sounding patronizing or creating an uncomfortable power dynamic? Meanwhile, the decision about the manufacturing plant weighed heavily on his mind. His business advisors had called twice to ask about delays in finalizing the acquisition. The longer he waited, the more questions they would ask. But every time he looked at the termination numbers, he thought about the families that would be affected, people who probably shopped at Rosie's Diner and whose lives were woven into the fabric of this small community. On Thursday evening, Marcus arrived at the diner earlier than usual, hoping to catch a quiet moment with Keisha before the dinner rush began. The restaurant was nearly empty, just a couple of regular customers nursing coffee at the counter and reading the local newspaper. Keisha greeted him with her usual warm smile, but Marcus could see the fatigue around her eyes. You're becoming one of our regulars, she said, leading him to his preferred booth by the window. I've been meaning to ask you, Marcus said as she poured his coffee. How do you manage to stay so positive all the time? You must work incredibly long hours. Keisha laughed, but there was something hollow about the sound. Some days are harder than others, she admitted. But I try to focus on the good things. Customers like you, who remind me that there are still kind people in the world. Co-workers who feel like family. The hope that things will get better eventually. What if they could get better sooner rather than later? Something in Marcus's tone made Keisha look at him more carefully. What do you mean? Marcus reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I've been doing some research into educational opportunities in this area. There are some interesting programs available that you might not know about. Keisha accepted the paper but did not unfold it. Sir, I appreciate your concern, but I've looked into college programs. The ones I can afford don't offer the courses I need, and the ones that do offer good programs cost more than I can manage while supporting my family. What if cost wasn't a factor? Keisha stared at him for a long moment. I don't understand what you're suggesting. Marcus took a deep breath. He had rehearsed this conversation in his mind dozens of times, but now that the moment had arrived, the words felt inadequate. My name is Marcus Richardson, he began. I'm a businessman from Chicago, and I'm here in Cedar Falls to make some decisions about the local manufacturing plant. But Meeting you has made me reconsider a lot of things about how business should be conducted and how we treat the people who make our communities work. Keisha's expression grew wary. Okay, I'd like to offer you a full scholarship to complete your college education, with additional support for living expenses so you don't have to work multiple jobs while studying. The silence stretched between them for nearly a minute. Keisha stared at Marcus as if he had suddenly sprouted a second head. That's not funny, she said finally. I'm not joking. You're a complete stranger. People don't just offer to pay for other people's college education. Marcus pulled out his phone and showed her a webpage. This is my company, Richardson Industries. You can look up my net worth if you want to verify that I can afford what I'm offering. Keisha glanced at the phone screen, then back at Marcus's face. Her expression cycled through disbelief, confusion, and something that might have been fear. Why? She asked quietly. Why would you do this for someone you don't even know? It was the question Marcus had been asking himself for days. Because I've spent the last 15 years focused on profit margins and efficiency reports, and I've forgotten that businesses exist to serve communities, not the other way around. Because I see in you the kind of person who could do incredible things if given the right opportunities. And because I can afford to do it, which means I should do it. Keisha shook her head slowly. This is crazy. Things like this don't happen to people like me. Why not? Because they just don't. Marcus leaned forward slightly. What if I told you that you're not the only one? What if I said I've been thinking about ways to help other people in similar situations? Other people? Your coworkers here, employees at the manufacturing plant, people throughout this community who have potential but lack opportunities. Marcus paused, organizing his thoughts. What if instead of just offering you a scholarship, I proposed something bigger? Keisha set down the coffee pot she had been holding. I think I need to sit down for this conversation. She slid into the booth across from Marcus, her professional composure completely abandoned. What are you talking about? I'm talking about establishing a foundation, a program that identifies talented people like you and provides them with educational opportunities, job training, small business loans, whatever they need to reach their potential. Marcus pulled out a tablet and showed her some preliminary research. I've been looking at the demographics of Cedar Falls and similar communities. There are thousands of people working in jobs that don't match their abilities or aspirations, simply because they haven't had access to better opportunities. Keisha stared at the screen without really seeing it. And you want to change that? I want to try, but I can't do it alone. I need someone who understands these communities from the inside, someone who knows what barriers people face and what kinds of support would actually make a difference. You're offering me a job? I'm offering you a chance to design your own future while helping others do the same. You could complete your business degree while working as a community liaison for the foundation. You'd identify candidates for assistance, help develop programs that address real needs, and serve as a bridge between the foundation and the people we're trying to help. Keisha was quiet for so long that Marcus began to worry he had overwhelmed her with too much information too quickly. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. You're serious about this? Completely serious. But why me? You could hire consultants, people with degrees, and experience in this kind of work. Marcus smiled. Because consultants would give me reports about poverty and opportunity gaps. You would give me the truth about what it's really like to live paycheck to paycheck while trying to build a better future. Because you care about people, not just as statistics or case studies, but as individuals with their own stories and struggles. Keisha looked around the diner, taking in the familiar sights and sounds that had been part of her daily routine for years. What about my job here? What about Rosie and Betty and my regular customers? You'd start by working part-time with the foundation while finishing school. Eventually, if things work out, you might transition to full-time work. But even then, you could maintain connections here. In fact, Rosie's Diner could become one of the foundation's community partners, a place where people come to learn about available programs. You've really thought this through. I've thought about little else for the past 3 days. Keisha stood up abruptly. I need to get back to work. The dinner crowd will be arriving soon. Marcus sensed her withdrawal and worried that he had pushed too hard, too fast. Of course, I didn't mean to interfere with your work. No, it's not that. It's just... Keisha struggled to find words. This is a lot to process. Nobody has ever offered me anything like this before. I don't know how to respond. You don't have to respond right now. Take time to think about it. Talk it over with people you trust. Keisha nodded and returned to her duties, but Marcus could see that her mind was elsewhere. She moved through her routine mechanically, forgetting to refill coffee cups and having to be reminded by customers when they were ready to order. Later that evening, after the dinner rush had ended and most customers had gone home, Keisha approached Marcus's table with obvious nervousness. "Can I ask you something?" she said, glancing around to make sure they wouldn't be overheard. "Anything. How do I know this is real? How do I know you're not some kind of scammer or that this isn't some elaborate joke?" Marcus had anticipated this question. He pulled out a business card and a letter of introduction from his attorney. "Call this number tomorrow. Ask to speak with Janet Morrison. She's my assistant, and she's been with the company for 12 years. She can verify my identity and explain more about how the foundation would work." Keisha accepted the card, but continued to look skeptical. "Even if you are who you say you are, what's to stop you from changing your mind? What if I quit my jobs and start school, and then you decide this whole foundation idea was a mistake?" "Legal contracts," Marcus replied simply. "If you agree to participate, we'll have lawyers draw up agreements that protect your interests. The scholarship money would be held in trust, guaranteed regardless of what happens to me or my company." "You'd really do that?" "I would." Keisha sat down across from him again, her expression thoughtful. "Can I tell you something that might change your mind about me?" Marcus nodded, curious about what she might reveal. "I'm not just working 2 jobs because I need the money for school," she said quietly. "My mom has been in and out of hospitals for the past 3 years. Cancer. She doesn't have good insurance, and the medical bills keep piling up. Even if you paid for my college, I'd still need to work to help with her treatment costs." "I'm sorry about your mother," Marcus said sincerely. "How is she doing now?" "She's in remission, but the doctors want her to continue with regular checkups and some ongoing treatments. It's expensive, and she worries constantly about the financial burden on our family." Marcus was quiet for a moment, processing this new information. Would it help if the foundation provided assistance with medical expenses as well as educational costs? Keisha's eyes filled with tears. "You can't be serious." "Why not? If we're going to help people reach their potential, we need to address the obstacles that prevent them from focusing on their goals. Medical debt is one of those obstacles. But the money, it would be so much more than you originally offered." Marcus shrugged. "I have more money than I can spend in 10 lifetimes. What's the point of having it if I don't use it to make a positive difference?" Keisha wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I don't know what to say. Say you'll think about it. Say you'll call Janet tomorrow and start the process of making this real. What about the other people you mentioned? The foundation for the whole community." Marcus smiled. "That starts with you. You'd be our first success story, our proof of concept. If it works, we'll expand the program to help others. And if it doesn't work, then we'll have learned something valuable, and we'll try a different approach. But I have a feeling it's going to work better than either of us can imagine right now." Keisha looked around the diner one more time, her gaze lingering on the familiar details that had defined her world for so long. When she turned back to Marcus, her expression had changed. The wariness was still there, but it was mixed with something else now, hope. "Okay," she said quietly. "I'll call your assistant tomorrow." Marcus felt a surge of satisfaction that had nothing to do with closing a business deal or increasing quarterly profits. This was different, deeper, more meaningful than any success he had achieved in his corporate career. "There's one more thing," he said as Keisha prepared to return to her closing duties. "What's that?" 6 months later, Marcus Richardson stood in the conference room of the newly established Richardson Foundation headquarters, looking out at the bustling downtown area of Cedar Falls. The foundation had transformed a former department store into a modern community center, complete with classrooms, computer labs, and meeting spaces where local residents could access educational and career development programs. The transformation had been remarkable, but not without challenges. Marcus had learned that good intentions and financial resources, while necessary, were not sufficient to create lasting change. Real change required understanding, patience, and the kind of local knowledge that only came from people who had lived the experiences the foundation was trying to address. Keisha had become invaluable in that regard. True to her promise, she had called Janet Morrison the day after their conversation at the diner. Within 2 weeks, she had enrolled in an accelerated degree program at the state university, while beginning her work as the foundation's first community liaison. Her natural ability to connect with people, combined with her growing understanding of educational and social services, made her an ideal bridge between the foundation's resources and the community's needs. But success had not come easily or quickly. The initial response from the community had been mixed. Some residents were suspicious of Marcus's motives, wondering what he really wanted in return for his generosity. Others were skeptical that the foundation would last, having seen previous economic development initiatives fail when outside investors lost interest or encountered financial difficulties. Keisha had been crucial in addressing these concerns. She organized town hall meetings where Marcus could speak directly with residents about the foundation's goals. She identified trusted community leaders who could vouch for the program's legitimacy. Most importantly, she helped Marcus understand that earning trust required time and consistent action, not just good intentions and financial backing. The first real breakthrough had come when the foundation helped Maria Santos, a single mother who worked at the struggling manufacturing plant, obtain certification as a medical technician. Maria had been facing the prospect of unemployment when Marcus announced his decision not to acquire the plant, but the foundation's job retraining program allowed her to transition into a growing field with better pay and more security. Word of Maria's success spread quickly through the community, and applications for foundation assistance began to increase. Within 3 months, the program was helping 25 local residents pursue various forms of education and training. By the 6-month mark, that number had grown to over 60, with a waiting list of additional applicants. Marcus had also kept his promise about supporting Keisha's mother's medical expenses. The foundation had established a health assistance program that helped cover costs for preventive care and treatment for residents who lacked adequate insurance. Keisha's mother, Janet, had become one of the program's biggest advocates, often speaking at community events about how the assistance had allowed her to focus on recovery instead of worrying about medical bills. But perhaps the most significant change had been in Marcus himself. The foundation work had reconnected him with the values that had driven him in his early career before success, and wealth had insulated him from the daily struggles of ordinary people. He found himself spending more time in Cedar Falls than in Chicago, drawn to the tangible progress he could see in individual lives rather than the abstract numbers that defined his corporate achievements. On this particular morning, Marcus was reviewing applications for the foundation's newest initiative, small business development loans for local entrepreneurs. The program had been Keisha's idea, born from her observation that many community members had valuable skills and business concepts, but lacked access to startup capital. A knock on his office door interrupted his review. Keisha entered, carrying a folder of documents and wearing the kind of excited expression that usually meant she had discovered something important. "I have someone I'd like you to meet," she said, settling into the chair across from his desk. "His name is David Chun, and he's got one of the most interesting business proposals I've seen yet." Marcus set aside the loan applications. Over the months, he had learned to trust Keisha's judgment about people and their potential. Her recommendations invariably led to success stories for the foundation. "Tell me about him." "He's 28 years old, graduated from the state university 5 years ago with a degree in computer science. He's been working at a tech company in the state capital, but he wants to move back to Cedar Falls to be closer to his elderly parents." "What's his business idea?" Keisha opened her folder and pulled out a detailed business plan. "He wants to start a technology consulting company that specializes in helping small businesses and nonprofits modernize their operations. His target market would be organizations like local medical practices, accounting firms, and community groups that need better computer systems but can't afford big consulting fees." Marcus skimmed through the business plan, impressed by the thoroughness of David's research and the practicality of his approach. "This looks solid. What does he need from us?" "Startup capital for office equipment and initial marketing, plus some assistance with business development. The total request is relatively modest, about $40,000. Keisha paused. "But there's something else that makes this particularly interesting." "What's that?" David wants to hire locally and train people from the community to work as technical support specialists. He's proposing a partnership with the foundation where we help identify candidates for training, and his company provides job opportunities for people who complete the program. Marcus felt the familiar surge of excitement that came with discovering a program that could multiply the foundation's impact. How many jobs would he eventually create? He estimates starting with 3 or 4 positions in the first year, growing to 8 or 10 within 3 years if the business succeeds. I'd like to meet him. I was hoping you'd say that. He's actually here today, meeting with some potential clients and getting familiar with the local business community. I could arrange for him to stop by this afternoon if you're available. Marcus checked his calendar. I'm free after 2 o'clock. Perfect. I'll let him know. As Keisha prepared to leave, Marcus called her back. How are things going with your coursework? Keisha's face lit up. She had been taking a full course load for the past 2 semesters while working part-time with the foundation, and her professors consistently praised her academic performance and leadership skills. Really well. I'm actually ahead of schedule to graduate next spring. My advisor thinks I should consider applying to graduate school for a master's degree in public administration. That sounds like an excellent idea. The foundation could benefit from having someone with advanced training in program management and policy development. Actually, I wanted to talk to you about that. I've been thinking about the foundation's long-term structure, and I have some ideas about how we might expand our impact. Marcus gestured for her to sit back down. I'm listening. Keisha pulled out a notebook filled with handwritten notes and sketches. Right now, we're doing great work here in Cedar Falls, but there are hundreds of communities facing similar challenges. What if we developed a model that could be replicated in other locations? You mean franchising the foundation concept? Not exactly franchising, but creating a template that other philanthropists or community organizations could adapt to their specific circumstances. We could provide training, consultation, and ongoing support to help them establish similar programs. Marcus studied her notes, recognizing the same systematic thinking that had made her such an effective community liaison. Have you researched whether anything like this already exists? Some, but most existing programs are either much larger in scale, focused on major cities, or much more limited in scope. What makes our approach unique is the combination of individual assistance and community development, plus the emphasis on local knowledge and grassroots leadership. This could be the next phase of the foundation's evolution. Keisha nodded enthusiastically. I've been working on a preliminary proposal. It's not ready to present yet, but I think it could be really significant. Marcus was struck again by how much Keisha had grown over the past 6 months. The shy, overworked waitress he had met at Rosie's Diner had developed into a confident advocate and strategic thinker whose insights often surpassed those of his experienced business advisors. Take your time developing the proposal, he said. When you're ready, we'll review it together and see how it might fit into our long-term planning. After Keisha left, Marcus returned to his application reviews, but his mind kept drifting to the broader implications of what the foundation had become. What had started as an impulse to help one deserving person had evolved into a comprehensive approach to community development that was attracting attention from researchers, policymakers, and other philanthropists. The afternoon meeting with David Chun confirmed Marcus's initial impression that this was exactly the kind of partnership the foundation should pursue. David was articulate, well-prepared, and clearly committed to contributing to his hometown's economic development. More importantly, his business concept aligned perfectly with the foundation's goal of creating sustainable opportunities rather than temporary assistance. I want to be clear about my expectations, David explained as they discussed the details of his proposal. This isn't just about starting a business. It's about proving that young professionals can build successful careers in smaller communities if they have access to the right resources and support systems. Marcus appreciated David's directness and his understanding of the foundation's broader mission. What made you decide to propose this partnership rather than seeking traditional business financing? Partly practical reasons. Banks are hesitant to lend to new businesses, especially in smaller markets. But mostly philosophical reasons. I want my company to be part of the community development effort, not just another business that happens to be located here. Tell me more about your training program idea. David opened his laptop and showed Marcus a detailed curriculum he had developed. Most technical support work doesn't require a 4-year degree, just solid training in specific systems and good problem-solving skills. I've identified several people in the community who have the right aptitude, but lack formal technical credentials. How would you identify and recruit trainees? Through the Foundation's existing programs. Keisha has already given me profiles of people who might be interested, individuals who have demonstrated reliability and learning ability in other contexts. Marcus was impressed by how thoroughly David had researched the local situation and integrated his business plan with the Foundation's existing operations. What kind of timeline are you thinking about? I'd like to launch the business in about 3 months, starting with basic services for existing clients I've already identified. The training program could begin with our first group of candidates in about 6 months. And if the business doesn't succeed? David met Marcus's gaze directly. Then, I'll have learned valuable lessons about entrepreneurship, and the trainees will have acquired marketable skills they can use with other employers. Either way, the investment in human capital will have value. It was exactly the kind of thoughtful, realistic approach that Marcus had come to expect from the Foundation's most successful partners. Let's move forward with this. Keisha can work with you on the paperwork and timeline. As David gathered his materials and prepared to leave, he paused at the office door. Mr. Richardson, can I ask you something? Of course. Why did you really start this foundation? I've read the official mission statement and the press coverage, but I'm curious about your personal motivation. Marcus considered how to answer that question. Over the past 6 months, many people had asked similar questions, and he had developed various responses depending on the audience and context. But something about David's direct manner encouraged honesty. I started this foundation because I met someone who reminded me that business success means nothing if it doesn't contribute to human flourishing, he said finally. Everything we've accomplished here grew out of a conversation with a waitress who cared more about doing her job well than about what she might get in return. David smiled. That would be Keisha. You know her. I ate at Rosie's Diner throughout college. Keisha was always the server who remembered how you liked your coffee and asked about your family. When I heard she was working with the Foundation, it made perfect sense. After David left, Marcus walked to his office window and looked down at the street below. He could see the entrance to Rosie's Diner 2 blocks away, where this entire journey had begun with a simple meal and an observation about character and kindness. His phone buzzed with a text message from Keisha. David Chun meeting went well? He seems really excited about the partnership. Marcus typed back. Very well. Let's move forward with his proposal. Almost immediately, another message arrived. Great. By the way, could you stop by the diner tonight? Rosie wants to discuss something with you. Marcus was intrigued. In the 6 months since the Foundation had launched, Rosie had been supportive but somewhat reserved in her interactions with him. She appreciated the positive impact the programs were having on her employees and customers, but she had maintained a respectful distance from the Foundation's operations. That evening, Marcus arrived at the diner to find it busier than usual for a weeknight. Many of the customers were people he recognized from Foundation programs. Maria Santos was there with her children, celebrating her completion of medical technician certification. Tom Bradley, who had used a Foundation loan to upgrade his auto repair shop, was having dinner with his wife. Several other program participants were scattered throughout the restaurant. Keisha greeted him at the door with an expression he could not quite interpret. Excitement mixed with nervousness. Rosie's in her office, she said, leading him toward the back of the restaurant. She's been working on something special for the past few weeks. Rosie's office was a small, cluttered space behind the kitchen, filled with decades of receipts, supplier catalogs, and photographs documenting the diner's long history in Cedar Falls. Rosie herself was a woman in her 70s, silver-haired and practical, who had owned the restaurant for over 40 years. Marcus, she said, standing up from her desk and extending her hand. Thank you for coming. It's my pleasure. Keisha said you wanted to discuss something. Rosie gestured for him to sit down in the single visitor's chair while she perched on the edge of her desk. I wanted to give you this, she said, handing him a folded piece of paper. Marcus unfolded the paper to find a handwritten note in neat, careful script. Dear Mr. Richardson, you don't know me, but I have been watching what you and your foundation have done for our community over the past 6 months. I have seen young people discover opportunities they never knew existed. I have watched families find hope again after struggling for years. I have witnessed neighbors helping neighbors in ways that seemed impossible before you arrived. I am writing this note because I want you to know that your kindness has created something more valuable than money or business success. You have reminded us that we live in a community where people care about each other's dreams and struggles. You have shown us that big changes can start with small acts of generosity between strangers. Most importantly, you have proven that investing in people's potential is the best kind of investment anyone can make. I am an old woman who has spent most of her life serving food to the people of this town. I have watched families grow up, celebrate victories, and support each other through difficult times. What you have built here will continue long after both of us are gone, because you understood that real success comes from helping others succeed. Thank you for choosing to see the best in people like Keisha, and thank you for showing all of us what is possible when someone with resources decides to use them wisely. With gratitude and respect, Rose Martinez, Rosie. Owner, Rosie's Diner. Marcus read the note twice, feeling a tightness in his throat that had nothing to do with the small, warm office. When he looked up, Rosie was watching him with the kind of expression that suggested she understood exactly how her words had affected him. "This means more to me than you can imagine," he said quietly. "I figured it might. You're not what I expected when Keisha first told me about you." "What did you expect? Someone who would make big promises and disappear when the work got hard. Someone who would want credit and recognition for everything. Someone who didn't really understand what life is like for people in places like Cedar Falls." And now, Rosie smiled, the first truly warm expression he had ever seen from her. "Now I think you understand something that a lot of wealthy people never figure out. Real generosity isn't about giving money to make yourself feel good. It's about using your advantages to help other people discover their own advantages." Marcus folded the note carefully and slipped it into his jacket pocket. "Can I ask you something, Rosie?" "Sure. What made you decide to write this? Tonight, I mean. Why now?" Rosie was quiet for a moment, organizing her thoughts. "Because I wanted to make sure you knew how much good you've done before you started taking it for granted. Success can change people, and I wanted to capture this moment when you still remember why you started." It was a perceptive observation, and Marcus realized that Rosie had identified a danger he had not fully considered. The foundation's success was attracting attention from investors and organizations that wanted to partner with him on larger-scale projects. There was pressure to expand quickly, to systematize and scale the programs in ways that might sacrifice the personal connection and local knowledge that had made them effective. "I won't forget," he promised. "I hope not. But if you ever do, come back and read that note. It'll remind you." Marcus stood up to leave, but Rosie's voice stopped him at the office door. "One more thing. Keisha doesn't know I wrote that note. She just knows I wanted to talk with you privately. I'd prefer to keep it that way. Of course. Thank you for trusting me with it." As Marcus walked back through the diner, he noticed that several customers nodded or waved in recognition. 6 months ago, he had been a stranger in this community, an outsider whose wealth and status created barriers to genuine connection. Tonight, he felt like he belonged here, not because of what he had given, but because of what he had learned about the value of authentic relationships and shared purpose. Outside the diner, Marcus pulled out his phone and called Janet Morrison, his assistant in Chicago. "Janet, I need you to clear my calendar for the next 2 weeks. I want to spend some time here in Cedar Falls, working on long-term planning for the foundation." "Of course, Mr. Richardson. Should I reschedule your meetings with the investment committee?" Marcus thought about the corporate obligations waiting for him in Chicago, the quarterly reports, and strategic planning sessions that had once seemed so important. Reschedule everything. This is more important. As he walked back toward his hotel, Marcus felt in his pocket for Rosie's note. Tomorrow he would begin planning the next phase of the foundation's development, working with Keisha to design programs that could truly transform communities while preserving the personal connections that made the work meaningful. Tonight, though, he simply wanted to savor the knowledge that his life had found a purpose beyond anything he had previously imagined. A chance encounter with a kind waitress had led him to discover that the greatest return on investment came not from maximizing profits, but from maximizing human potential. That was a lesson worth more than any fortune he had ever accumulated. I'm withdrawing my company's bid for the manufacturing plant. Keisha stared at him in confusion. I don't understand. Isn't that why you came here? It was. But I've decided that preserving jobs and supporting this community is more important than adding another facility to my company's portfolio. Marcus gathered his jacket and prepared to leave. Sometimes the best business decision is the one that prioritizes people over profits. As Marcus walked to the door, he heard Keisha call his name softly. He turned back to see her standing in the middle of the diner, looking small and uncertain, but also hopeful. Thank you, she said simply. Marcus nodded and stepped out into the night air, feeling lighter than he had in years. Tomorrow he would make some phone calls that would surprise his business advisors and possibly anger some investors. But tonight, he had planted the seeds of something that could grow into genuine positive change. Behind him, through the diner's window, he could see Keisha moving with renewed energy, wiping down tables and preparing for the next day. She did not know it yet, but her life had just taken a dramatic turn toward a future filled with possibilities she had never dared to imagine. And Marcus did not know it yet, but his life had changed just as dramatically. The foundation he had proposed on impulse was about to become his greatest professional achievement, a legacy that would outlast any corporate empire he might build. That's just how the world works, Keisha said with a resigned shrug. Some people are lucky, others aren't. Marcus shook his head. It doesn't have to be that way. He left another generous tip and walked out into the night. But this time his mind was racing with possibilities. Back in his hotel room, he opened his laptop and began researching scholarship programs, educational grants, and community college transfer opportunities. By morning, he had the outline of a plan that was either brilliant or completely crazy. The problem was, he was not sure which.